At some point, I am going to have to turn off my camera. I need to reduce bandwidth and reduce the load on my internet connection. I have quite a lot of media and resources to share, like 10 different things. And so to make sure that we maintain a stable connection, I am eventually going to turn off my camera, but I want to discuss several things with you first. If you came in late, you missed the announcement that I made about APA documentation. We're going to start our lesson with that. And then we need to talk about your video and context assignments. Go over a kind of rubric for that, which I will send to each member of the class. I also, at the end of the lesson, will send your next graded assignment, and it's going to be an agenda. You draft a meeting agenda. As has been the case since the beginning of the semester, I've made some changes to the syllabus, so you no longer have to draft the minutes as well, just the agenda. But because I emailed you the syllabus, I cannot make changes to what I've already emailed, so I can only notify you in class of how the requirements have changed, and of course send you a handout that reflects what is now expected of that assignment. Okay? All right, so what is APA documentation? Why does it even matter? Why should you be concerned about it? Who cares anyway? Hopefully you do. This is the PowerPoint that I sent to you. Let me go full screen. Oh. Let's try that again. Okay, so this is the PowerPoint that I sent to you last week. Discussing APA documentation, we make a big deal about it at the university, most universities. It is a serious violation and may result in students being expelled from their college or university courses for using somebody else's work and not giving credit to the person whose work you're using. Even though, as I said, you're not doing research per se in this class, there are instances where you may, in a business setting or for business communication, draw on somebody else's work in your report. And so I want to just explain what APA documentation is and what it requires of you. It is the form of documentation used in business. It is a way of attributing or giving credit to the person whose book, whose report, whose research you're using to inform your own report, research, publication, whatever it is. It is a way of giving credit to the person whose work you're using. And there are two steps involved in APA documentation. The first are found in the body of your report or your document. They are short notes that we call in-text citations. And they are so short that they generally include the year of publication and the author's name. Whenever you borrow somebody else's work, you, in the body of the report, at the point where the information is borrowed, you indicate this by naming the person whose work you're borrowing. Let's say the person's last name is Johnson. I would expect to see at the point where you've borrowed material from Johnson, according to Johnson, you use signal phrases to help information to flow. Or even if you don't use the signal phrase, then in brackets at the end of the borrowed material, you would include the last name of the writer, Johnson, and year of publication, year the work was published. Those in-text citations are step one, and they look like this example that you see on screen, all right? Last name of the person whose work you're using and page number. That's the basic format. Now, there are some instances where you don't name the writer here. You might name the writer in the sentence according to Guridi. The rule for APA documentation is wherever the author's name appears, the year follows, year of publication. So if you had named the author up here, then this year of publication would come right here after the name of the author. And that is shown in the second example. right? So the rule for APA, because there's so many different kinds, APA is the kind that you would use in a business setting, is last name and year of publication. That is basic. But I'm sure you would agree that this is not enough for me to find Chavez's source. The purpose of documenting somebody else's work when you use it anyway is so that someone coming after you, let's say your report is particularly useful, someone wants to follow up on your research, they should be able to review your sources, go to the place where you have said you got the sources from, you indicate this in your references list, and find the information. That is how carefully cited your sources need to be. So those in-text citations, and these are the rules for in-text citations when you're directly quoting, even though you keep those to a minimum, they point to references, a references page or a references list. And on that page, you give complete information. These are the rules governing the references page, putting it together. So when you capitalize, when you put a dash, when you put a colon, and the various sources that you would use. Those notes point to these longer entries on a works cited. I'm saying works cited because that's MLA, on a references page, right? I'm sure you've seen this in a book, a journal article. This is a standard part of research. It is an essential part of research to, one, credit sources in the body of the essay, and then include complete bibliographic information on what we call a references page for APA. So what does this all mean? This first entry tells me that the person who wrote the paper used this journal article by T.J. Barrett called Friendship, Quality, and Social Development. And that article can be found in this journal. The journal's volume is number 11, and I can find it on pages 7 to 10. These entries each mean something. If you notice, there are different examples shown and more or less information included. For instance, the second one is a newspaper article. So there are different rules that you follow depending on the kind of source that you use. And there's no way really to learn these rules. I've been doing this for 20-something years, and I still don't know every rule. That is also because the rules are quite often updated. I think APA was last updated in 2016, 17, or maybe since then it's been updated. I'm not teaching APA format this semester outside of this class, but I might find that when I go and refresh this information, it has been updated and the rules have changed. The basic forms stay the same, but the best thing to do if you are undertaking research is to purchase a good handbook or to find a good online resource that tells you how to responsibly document somebody else's work and avoid plagiarism. That is the big no-no in academia now. So much emphasis is put on it. Plagiarism is dishonest. And as I said at the beginning of it, it is enough to get many students put out of school, right? Depending on the policy at the institution. So where is this good resource that would tell you how to document a newspaper, how to document a film, a documentary, a journal article? It is, and I'm going to show it to you. Let me find it. Let me stop this share. I'm going to point you to a university website. And I'm going to share what's now on my screen. So this is the University of Purdue's online writing lab. And you could buy yourself, or your company might buy an expensive handbook, $100 and something, or you could use a free online resource like this. This online writing lab reviews the rules for the two most common documentation formats, MLA and APA. This would be the one that you use when you open the guidebook. Okay, so we're still at the 7th edition. It hasn't been updated, which is good. MLA is up to 9th edition now. APA is always a little bit slower to be updated than MLA. But you open this resource. In the left margin, you have rules for articles and periodicals. The basic rules for in-text citations, electronic sources, so those sources that you find online, audio-visual media, other non-print sources. So as I said, it becomes so technical that it's really difficult to memorize or learn rules. But if you have a good handbook or an online resource that is reliable, it can show you how to document whatever source you're using. The most important thing is to be aware that you have to document or cite your sources. You cannot just use somebody else's words and take credit for it. And a lot of what I'm seeing students do, not necessarily in this class, but we do have a problem with responsibly using other people's work and crediting it. A lot of what I've seen students do is according to Google. Google is not a source, right? Google is a search engine that points you to various sources of information. And so more specific documentation is required, right? And this will tell you what is the specific rule for what you found on Google. So I just wanted to draw that to your, bring that to your attention. Be aware of APA guidelines. If for whatever reason you're doing research outside of this class at work, the responsible thing to do is to say, this is not my work. I'm using somebody else's work. And this is the person whose work I'm using. And this is where I got the source from, right? What do I mean when I say this is where I got the source from? So APA was updated in 2019, 7th edition, not bad. What do I mean when I say where I got it from? So let me stop that share right quick. How do I know where information comes from? If it's an online source, it includes, I don't want to click it because it'll take me to this page. It includes what we call a URL. If I were to click it, it will take me directly to the source. So that is what I mean when I say where did the information come from, okay? Somebody coming behind you should be able to click whatever source you've indicated you used in your paper and find the information the same way you did. That's how documentation works. All right, so I just wanted to share that with you. Any questions? I know that, as I said, research is not a big component of this course, but maybe for your video and context essay, or for anything on the final, you may use somebody else's work in preparation, I don't know. I'm gonna find out exactly what the format of your final is going to be, whether it's going to be online or face-to-face, and I'm gonna let you know. Okay, any questions for me about what I just said? Seemed like I said a mouthful. Okay, so I now want to discuss your video and context assignments. So I'm going to pull up two documents, your syllabus, and then the rubric that I'm going to email to each of you at the end of the lesson to kind of guide you. I need to find it. I have so many documents on this computer. Here we go. And your syllabus. Okay. So the first thing is your syllabus. just to remind you, your assignments are at the bottom, right? And so you're putting together a video, and I'm sure you've wondered what would I be looking for in grading your assignment. We are in week 8. Your videos, your presentations begin in 2 weeks, right? So March 22nd. We will have presentations in class from groups 1 and 2. And then on March 29th, 3 and 4. And they will conclude with presentation 5 on April 12th. So assignment 1, and I'm talking to the members of group 1. Let me get your names, because I'm going to invite some feedback from the members of group 1. Hopefully they are in the lesson. All right, Byron and Chanel. All right, so Chanel. I see Chanel here. Chanel, have you been able to connect with Byron at all for this assignment?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, Chanel. Because you are in group 1 and your presentation is scheduled for 2 weeks from now, time is of the essence for you. So what I'm going to do, Shanique is currently working in group 3 with Ricardo, Courtney, and Shanique. Shanique. Oh, so I'm going to move Byron from group 1. So you have had no conversation with Byron?
No, I never spoke to him.
Okay, all right. So is Ricardo here? Ricardo Adderley? I'm gonna say work with Ricardo. Chanel. If there is an issue with reaching Ricardo, please let me know this week so that I can further reassign you, okay? You may have to be moved from group 1 altogether.
Okay.
All right, but I want, when I put the rubric on the screen, I want you to make note of your group number and what your assignment requires you to do, because we're going to talk about what this video should demonstrate. So you could decide, you and your partner can decide who's the role of the manager and who's the underperforming employee, and you have the task of dismissing this employee. So essentially, you're communicating bad news. All right, so keep that in mind. That's group 1. Group 2, Leslie and Alexis. You are role-playing a job interview. We're going to talk about interview techniques, interview strategies. It is on the syllabus for next week, right? So that will help you. But bear in mind that that is the focus of your assignment. Group 3, Courtney and Shanique. An employee is meeting with a manager to complain about his supervisor. So you're kind of serving as a mediator. This would be an exercise that shows how a manager handles a situation with tact, with professionalism, a difficult situation, right? How he or she maintains and gets maintains order and gets resolution without necessarily bad-mouthing another employee. So it's going to involve some degree of tact. We're going to look at the rubric in a minute. Group 4, Danielle and Ellen. Your assignment is to handle an employee who's resigning, right? And you're trying to persuade him or her to reconsider. And then number 5, you meet with the supervisor, manager is meeting with the supervisor to address a poor example he or she is setting for junior staff. Again, bad news communication. Most of these are difficult situations that call for a degree of tact and professionalism. So I'd like to see how, based on what we've been talking about regarding communication, you would handle it. I want to stop this share and share with you the rubric. The assignment guidelines. As I said, I'm going to email this to you. These videos, because of the amount of work you will have to do to complete them, they're worth 15% of your grade. 10 of those points come from content, 5 from delivery, right? So your presentations will be evaluated based on the following. You want to make this as engaging as possible and present it in a format which the audience can follow. So effective listening, remember we talked about those several weeks ago. Effective listening and communication strategies should be evident at every stage of the communication act. You want to demonstrate, first of all, that you understand the assignment, which is why I just discussed what each assignment requires of you, or what the role play demands. So you want to show that you've understood the assignment and that you can meet those objectives. So if you're mediating conflict, then you need to be aware of the strategies that create a kind of professional and positive atmosphere. You want to show respect for the employee, but make sure your tone is not offensive or harsh, and seek to resolve conflict in a way that makes people feel satisfied. So it shouldn't dissolve into a rowing or screaming match, and there should definitely be some resolution at the end, right? If your assignment requires you to communicate bad news, then you need to use the appropriate conventions. Be positive, include a buffer, just kind of soften the bad news. Don't give bad information or misleading information. Have evidence. If you say this person is not doing X, Y, or Z, invent days and times that you can basically show them or point out where they've fallen short and provide a clear rationale, right? So reasons, support. If, again, no rowing, shouting, no screaming matches, if the purpose is to be persuasive, right? You're trying to get someone to stay on the job, not aggressive or pushy. Discuss those skills that you value from the employee, why you would want them to stay, a clear rationale for why the employee should stay. Your aim is to persuade them. You can decide whether the communication is successful or not, whether the employee decides to stay. But if the outcome is negative news or bad news, then the person who's resigning needs to follow the negative news conventions we talked about. And if it's a job interview, then the skills that we review next week about conducting a job interview and conducting yourself on a job interview should be evident, right? So professionalism in dress and also deportment. Okay, and appropriate interview questions. So what should the person being interviewed ask? What should the interviewer ask? Because you are each, I see a hand, Leslie, 1 second. Because you're each being graded individually for this assignment, I graded you as a group for the marketing assignment, but you will be given an individual grade. Each member of the group should have a clear role and should be involved in putting this together, right? Nobody's back should be to the camera. I'm hoping that you can nominate a third party, or you have someone willing to help you to record your short video, and that you have the means to do it. If you are challenged to find a quiet space, then BIF's office is open, and they're often open late into the evenings where you can go and plan with your classmate to get this done. Right, with your partner. But remember, delivery is 5 points as well. And delivery also involves stress and the kinds of nonverbal communication techniques and styles that we use. So posture, tone, well, tone is more verbal, but posture, facial expression, those things also count, right? Leslie, go ahead with your question.
I just wanted to ask, so you are requiring a full production?
She's like, this is gonna be long. So tell me what you mean by full.
I mean, video wise, is this something that we could like record on our phone?
Yeah, man, of course, record on your phone, man. Don't hire like a camera crew.
Okay.
No, just have somebody like, I don't know, TikTok or your phone, your camera on your phone, but you need to be able to have the stand to do it or have somebody do it for you, you and your partner, right? But no, nothing too elaborate, just something that you can communicate on your phone, share on your phone, and even if you have to send it to my phone, because you can't email it, we can do that, just so long as I have your assignment. But I'm hoping you're able to email because we will be sharing these in class, right? So if you need to, we can upload it to my YouTube channel and watch it from there. YouTube is always a good server. Just let me know what you need to do, right? What I could do to help you. I can record it for you, but if the format is a problem with us screening it in class, you could send it to me. I can upload it to my channel and then we watch it in class, right? From my YouTube channel. All right, that was Leslie. Chanel, you also had a question?
I did, but I think I got it answered.
Okay, you sure?
Yeah, because I just wanted to know if like we was recording it beforehand. So I think I got it answered.
Yeah, you're recording it before, huh?
Okay.
Okay, so any other questions about this assignment? It is a lot, I know it's a lot, but 15 points is a lot too, right? So put your best foot forward. Let me know how I can help in any way. And we seem to be losing some class members. I know it's difficult coming from work to do this 3-hour class, but if, for instance, Chanel, you find that you're not contacted by your group members or you can't reach them, remember to get back to me as early as possible so that I can put you into another group and you can begin working with them before they finalize their projection. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so I'm hoping that, you're not in that situation. All right. And group 1, if we have to reassign group 1, let me see what we'd be losing. The underperforming employee. All right. I hate to lose that one, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay. So I'm going to send this to everyone along with your assignment tonight. Let me make a note. I have to jot these things down. Okay. So those are the 2 things I wanted to clear up. It is now at the point where I have to share a lot with you, beginning with the PowerPoint. And so let me close out some of these. I have like 10 different documents open on my screen. The first step to being organized is to close out what I don't need. All right. Now we're trying out a new internet provider. It's not going well. It's like the lesser of 2 evils on this island, honestly. One is bad, the other is worse. So I'm going to start my video. I'm going to start sharing. First, I'm going to share the PowerPoint with you. And it is going to cover the subject of our lesson tonight, the PowerPoint, and you're going to need to take notes. We're going to talk about proper meeting procedures. And because you didn't get the video or the lecture that I recorded last week, I'm going to send that to you at the end of the meeting as well. Okay? All right, so let me open this PowerPoint. So let me close. APA documentation. All right, we're reducing internet usage, good stuff. All right, so you're looking at the first slide on the PowerPoint. It may seem like an inane question, right? What is a meeting? And you may ask yourself, who doesn't know what a meeting is? But we're going to address some assumptions that people have related to meetings. And at the end of this lesson, we're going to talk about how to revolutionize meetings to make them even more productive, right? So we have been moving steadily along for much of the semester. We are already at week 8. That means we have about 6 weeks left, and the 7th week is your final exam. I said earlier that I'm gonna find out exactly what format that will take and give you a date for that. And I will let you know next class. Okay, so tonight we're gonna continue our lecture style discussions and talk about what meetings are. It's probably already a very common element of your work day or your work routine. I know that it is. We in fact have a meeting. It is for me. We have a meeting tomorrow, and I'll be honest, I'm not necessarily looking forward to it. And that is the attitude of too many employees. Oh Lord, another meeting, right? So before we end the lesson tonight, we'll talk about how to make meetings better, right? More productive for the employee. For the chairperson attending the meetings, because you'll be surprised to find out that they often don't think the meetings are that productive either. So if we're going to conduct an effective meeting, we have to understand exactly what it is, right? And what it involves. So we know that it involves bringing people together. So you have individuals, there's some mutual interest. People need to accomplish a particular objective, and there is some discussion involved in this meeting. And the meeting is under the control of a leader. Right? Somebody is taking control of the meeting. We know basically what it means. Then as it relates to meetings, we may know about some common terms, right? Words like a quorum. We know what a quorum is. We know that that is the minimum number of people we need present at a meeting to make the meeting valid. If we don't have a quorum, then we basically can't have a meeting. Whenever a vote is passed or there are important decisions that need to be made in large organizations, we put forth a motion or proposal. That's another common meeting term, right? A motion or proposal. If after discussion, the motion or proposal is passed, then we know that that becomes a resolution. So these are common terms. So we know what a quorum is. We know what a proposal is. We know how a proposal moves from proposal to resolution. Sorry, from motion, a motion to a resolution. And a resolution is generally binding. So once something has been resolved, that stands. And it's often recorded in the meetings. It should be recorded in the meeting as a resolution that came out of X meeting on X date. There are formal and informal meetings. So formal meeting may follow the following format. So you may have a chair directing the course of the meeting, fielding motions, fielding debate, and then you're expected to conduct yourself a particular way in a meeting, right? So you need to be courteous. That's expect. Whenever I think about this, I always think about the parliamentary channel and the meetings we've seen happen there, and whether they pass the muster or meet the standard. And I have to smile. We're not going to pass judgment and say yes or no. But whenever I think about how meetings should proceed, my mind goes to the parliamentary channel. But you're not just supposed to conduct yourself in a particular way, right? And you're not supposed to veer off topic. So your discussion is limited to some focus established by this meeting group. And then if you want to have a debate or discussion, there needs to be something put up, right? Some motion made. Debate cannot start unless there's been a motion. But formal meetings often don't proceed according to order in that way. That is ideal, right? Where there is a set order of business. But we still need to know what a formal meeting is and what the set order of business involves. So the first thing is you have an agenda. And the agenda controls what happens in the meeting, what is discussed, the order of business in the meeting. The first thing you might be asked to do when you attend the meeting is to approve, amend, and then if there are no amendments, there is a motion passed for the agenda to be accepted. Many of us go through this as a normal part of our day-to-day work routine. And so I want to ask you two questions. What was the last meeting that you attended? And what was it that made it productive or unproductive, or satisfying or unsatisfying? What was the last meeting you attended? And how did that go? Chanel?
The last meeting I attended it wasn't a formal meeting. I guess we call them powwows.
Mm-hmm.
It's just quick and short.
Okay.
I would say it was productive. It was pertaining to something that was coming up, and my supervisor wanted to remind us. She took that time to tell us that the reason we were having the powwow is because she doesn't feel like all of us check our emails.
And so so the meeting was kind of punitive. Y'all ain't reading your emails, so come to this meeting.
Yeah, so hence the reason for the powwow.
Okay, so I like the term powwow. We're gonna come back to that because it's a form of a meeting. It's not formal, like you said, but they're different formats we're gonna look at. So you said it was productive. I missed that part of it.
It was productive. Because by the time this week, the information that she told us about, we were able to get it completed before the deadline.
Okay,
So
awesome. Awesome. So you accomplished something. Maybe because the meeting was short. Maybe because of the skill of the person conducting the meeting, but the objective was met, right? Anybody else? Thank you for sharing that, Chanel. Anybody else? I'll share. I won't name my employer, not in this recording. But I last attended a meeting. We have a regular meeting every month. And things are done, but oftentimes there is the feeling that we've been talking about the same issues over and over and over again. And that is bad for employee morale as well, because you question whether anything at all is getting done. And I'm sure we've all been there as employees where we're like, Lord, this ain't resolved yet. Or Jesus, we didn't need to meet about this again. Or did we even have to have this meeting at all? So one of the things managers, supervisors, and people calling meetings are up against is a kind of resistance to meetings. They seem to be, more than anything else, an interruption to our day. We have a lot of work to do. a lot of things on our plate, and a meeting seems to pull us away from all the things we need to be accomplishing. And oftentimes employees regard the meeting as a waste of time. We're going to address, as I said, ways to prevent that from happening, right? How can we make more effective meetings or make sure that at the end of it, the objectives of the meeting have been met, right? What we need to do is plan. That's key. The meeting has to be planned. So Chanel gave us the example of a powwow. And the powwow may have seemed very informal. It may in fact have been very informal, but that could not have happened without some degree of planning by the person who called the meeting. He or she had to think about what they wanted to say, the objectives they wanted to meet, and whether that was a 15-minute meeting, a 20-minute meeting, 10-minute meeting, had to keep those objectives in mind. He or she also had to think about what those attending the meeting needed from them to meet the objectives that he or she set. So what information do I need to communicate? You have to plan. But we hold meetings for various purposes, right? It could be a planning meeting. Even so, for the planning meeting, we plan before the meeting. We may need to provide information. We may need to nail down some commitments. We may need to come to agreements. We may have meetings to sever relationships or to solve problems, to train, to minimize errors, like to nail down a process. But whatever it is, the meeting objective has to be clear. So we're gonna now, let me stop the share. We're gonna look at different kinds of meetings. And basically why we hold them. So forgive me if it takes a minute for me to find. My resource, like I said, I have a lot of things open to minimize the time it takes me to find what I need. All right, so different types of meetings. Brainstorming, training, decision-making, information-focused meetings. So I want you to make note of these various kinds of meetings. I will talk about the purpose. So you may have more traditional meetings, right, that follow a format in which you have a meeting leader or a chairperson, and the meeting follows a very structured pattern. You may have more instructional meetings, or called here training meetings, or lecture style meetings, kind of like what we do every Wednesday from 6 to 9, where the meeting attendees, you, the students, absorb material. So I provide information, you absorb material, and then you have a discussion period or some kind of practical period where you demonstrate, you can implement, and you've understood the material covered. And then there's usually some assessment at the end, right? Then you may have some developmental meetings or brainstorming meetings, decision-making meetings. The purpose of these meetings is to develop some policy, some practice, some standard operating procedure, or some procedure. This format is usually more interactive because people are sharing ideas, right? You may have some suggestions, your colleagues may also have suggestions, and you field ideas, right? You basically piggyback off other people's ideas and you bring your experience to bear to come up with a format or solution that works. And at the end of it, a decision has to be reached, right? And then not on this, but another kind of meeting is a reconciliation meeting or mediation meeting. You may see these in law where something is arbitrated. You have somebody forming or performing the role, sorry, not forming, of a mediator. So there may be two separate attendees presenting their side of the case. And then you have somebody mediating as they express their opinions, and the goal is to arrive at a conclusion. And so the point, no matter the kind of meeting you're attending, the goal is some decision-making or resolution. So there has to be some objective met as a result of this meeting. Otherwise, it's just a pointless waste of time. All right? Good. So those 4 types of meeting are important. I want you to write those down. And I want us to take another break to discuss some questions that involve planning a meeting or putting a meeting together, the stages. What do you think they involve? So I'm going to stop this. I want to close this out. And I'm going to start another share. I'm going to give you some time to think about the responses to these questions. Let me make it a little bit bigger for you. There we go. Okay, so you move from just attending a meeting to planning. Anyone who's planned a meeting, I want you to think about what each of the 3 tasks involve. What does planning a meeting involve, or arranging a meeting, or managing a meeting? What do you think is the most difficult? Actually, 2 tasks, planning and arranging, are closely aligned. And then, what is the role of the chairperson? How tightly do you think he or she needs to control the meeting? So I'm going to give you some time to absorb the questions and then think about responses. You may want to jot down notes so that you can volunteer your answers. But what does planning or arranging a meeting involve? What does managing the meeting involve? What do you think is the most difficult? And how tightly do you think the chairperson needs to control the meeting? What is his or her role? Okay, so what does planning or arranging a meeting involve? What tasks do you think the person responsible for this need to make sure they have done? Chanel? I just love that Chanel is always the first one to raise her hand. Go ahead.
I would say it would involve making sure you have the key issues
Okay,
that you would want to speak about, or
Okay.
any updates or feedback.
okay. So when you're planning a meeting, you need the key issues that need to
Right.
be decided. Okay, so yes, because you need to be sure that this meeting needs to take place, all right? There's nothing like calling a meeting that didn't really need to happen. And people are looking at you like you are not serious. You know how many things I had to do today. What else is planning involved? Thank you, Chanel. Or arranging the meeting. And some practical things we have to do too. I saw 2 participants' hands go up. It only shows me the name of the first student. Who's the second person that raised their hand?
Leslie.
Don't be
Hello?
shy. Okay, go ahead,
Oh.
Ellen.
Leslie.
Oh,
I know I
Leslie, go
raised.
ahead.
Oh, okay. A planned meeting may consist of gathering detailed information to be presented, more than likely with effective meaning and at least, instructions or things like that to come to a resolution, something like that.
Absolutely. So you need to have materials for your meeting participant, right? What information do they need? Generally, you distribute an agenda, things like that. We'll get into more of that later, but you need some information. You need to give them materials, right? What else do you need to do as you're planning and arranging this meeting? Practical stuff that people may not even think of. Go ahead, I can see 2 participants. Let me click on it to see which 2. Leslie and Ellen. Let's hear from Ellen.
Ensuring that the right persons are in the meeting.
You need to invite the right people, right? So email, and you need to give them advance notice, right? So you can't, it's bad form at least, to want to meet with people at 3 o'clock and you tell them at 2:30, no, or 2 o'clock. You need to give them advance notice. They need to prepare. They need to arrange their schedules. It is also bad form to cancel a meeting without giving people adequate notice, right? You don't do that last minute either. What else do you need? You would need to invite the right people, but where are you inviting them to? What do you need? We need to make sure this is something that people don't
The
even.
venue,
You need a venue. Don't assume that conference room A in your office is going to be available for your sales team meeting. You might need to book conference room A. You need a venue. So those practical things. When you arrange a meeting, other practical things. The secretary messaged me today. She said, are you attending tomorrow's meeting? I want to make sure we get lunch and we have the right number. Things like that. Water for people attending. Lunch, if that's a part of the meeting, and lunch is usually a part of our meeting, since as hardworking teachers work through lunch, right? Those practical things, you want people to be comfortable. And so, yes, information gathering, yes, inviting the right people, yes, booking the venue, yes, giving them enough notice, but ensuring their comfort in other ways. Water, even if you can't provide food, water and tea. Right? If it's a morning meeting, or coffee, especially if it's a morning meeting. Now, what does managing a meeting involve? So you are chairing this meeting. What does that involve? You're in the hot seat for an hour or however long the meeting should be. Those of you who have observed people in your organization leading the meeting, what have they been doing? What are they responsible for?
total control of the meeting.
Control and control of the discussion. Oftentimes, they set parameters too. They keep people focused on the time constraints. If this meeting is supposed to be an hour and it goes for an hour and a half, that is in a lot of ways the fault of the chair, because he or she should indicate how much time you have and should hold you to it. And you may hear people say, we have to move on. I'm sorry, in the interest of time. they're trying to respect people's time and trying to keep to the set objectives and the parameters of the meeting. The chair also has to establish expectations, right? I think it was Chanel who said an important part of planning is knowing why the meeting is taking place. The person managing the meeting has to make sure that that objective is met, right? The different stages, smooth transition, if the different people speaking, the chair has to smoothly move from one person to the next, from one part of the meeting to the next. Keeping the discussion focused, we'll talk about how meetings can go off track. And then dealing with unexpected problems. So someone was supposed to come to present at the meeting. They're not coming at all, or they're running late. What happens? What does the chair do to fill that time? All of these things are the role or responsibility of the person managing the meeting. It's a dynamic role, and that person has to be ready for possible changes. What do you think is the most difficult task? Is it planning and arranging or managing the meeting? What's harder?
I think managing the meeting, because you have differences of opinion,
Mhm.
and you have to ensure that everybody speak at the right time,
Mhm.
keep everybody calm.
Mhm. I think managing the meeting is harder. When you plan, you're not getting dynamic changes thrown at you. You're not having to pivot and adjust. You're not having to deal with things as they come up. It's a plan, right? In the meeting, it calls for some degree of dynamism from you. You have to be willing to adapt and pivot and pay attention to body language and pay attention to cues from the meeting attendees and participants and make changes as necessary. If objectives are not being met, steer people back on the right course. Because it is so dynamic and it's often in flux, right? The proceedings or the way the meeting is going. Managing the meeting for me is more difficult than the planning, right? It's easy to plan, very difficult to execute, especially when other people are involved. How tightly does the chairperson need to control the meeting? That depends on the kind of meeting. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by the level of control the chairperson needs to have is determined by the kind of meeting. Consider Chanel's example of the powwow and the more informal meeting with her colleagues. Does that require a whole lot of control? Consider a brainstorming meeting. Consider something more interactive, something less structured. Would that require as much control from the chair? Why or why not? Would it? Would you expect in an interactive meeting for someone to be sitting at a lectern or a desk at the front of the room or on the podium and the meeting attendees are interacting amongst themselves? Would you expect that? No, because in an interactive meeting, the purpose is information sharing and engagement. And so even the chair needs to be involved in that. Some degree of control is necessary. As the time is winding down, you may want to remind people. If there are different groups working, you may weave between the groups to share ideas and field questions. But less structured meetings require less control. More structured meetings, especially if there's a big agenda. The chairperson really needs to be in control to make sure that all the objectives are met and every item on the agenda takes place in the allotted time. right? If you have a meeting that's supposed to last an hour and the agenda is a 10-item agenda, that's a lot. You have 9 or 8 different people speaking. It is your job as the chair to keep them within the limits of the time they've been given, to make sure that in an hour, people really are ready to leave the meeting because they have other commitments that day. Okay, so the amount of control depends on the nature of the meeting or the purpose of the meeting. All right, good. So I'm going to stop this share. And we're going to go back to our PowerPoint. Let me close this out. And so basically what we've been saying is that good meetings are planned, structured through writing and planning, both before, during, and after the meeting. And we'll talk about what planning is necessary after the meeting, because you may think the meeting's over, what do I have to plan? Yeah, there's more work to be done even after the meeting, right? As you indicated, planning the meeting can be quite a lot of work, right? For the person planning and managing. But depending on the nature of the meeting, it could also involve a lot of work for the people in the meeting as well, right? I just gave you the example of an interactive meeting. You don't just sit and take in information, right? With our meetings, a lot of my work is done before class. So I have to get my notes and think about what we need to discuss and what does the syllabus say we need to review during this class. And then as we go over the material, try to ask questions and elicit responses to keep students engaged and make sure people understand where we're going with this discussion, right? And so that is a unique situation where there is a lot of work before and not as much, but also a lot of work during the meeting as well. And you should be working. You should be jotting down notes and you're thinking and your brain is working as well, right? What is the tool if you're planning a meeting? We need to think of these 4 fundamental elements that impact the productivity. So how productive is your meeting? I want you to jot down these 4 key elements that determine how productive your meeting will be. The first one is setting objectives, setting goals or objectives. What else determines the productivity of your meeting? Planning. We're going to talk a lot about that tonight. The next, control, the measure or degree of control the person chairing the meeting has. And then closure, what happens after the meeting. And so if you look at the information on the slide, you will see that effective meetings take a lot of work. In order for them to be effective, things have to happen before, during, and after. You need clear objectives. The meeting needs to be well planned. During the meeting, there needs to be control maintained. And after the meeting, there needs to be some steps followed. People need to be given things to do, right? Otherwise, what was the point of the meeting, right? So somebody said it during our discussion. I can't remember the student that said it, but we need clear objectives. Why are we having this meeting? I think it was Ellen. If you don't know why you're having the meeting as the planner, your participants aren't going to know either. If it's not clear to you, it's not going to be clear to them. So what do you think is the most important tool? The number 1 tool that you need as the meeting planner? It cannot be ignored. You absolutely need it. Maybe in a powwow, no. There's nothing formal distributed. That person managing the meeting may have it jotted down in their notes, but there's one important tool, and that's the agenda. That's it. You need an agenda. You absolutely need an agenda. And so whether that is written in your notes and you verbally tell the meeting attendants, because it's just like a little powwow, brief meeting, what this meeting will accomplish, or something more formal where you distribute the agenda to meeting participants before the meeting. you need a plan for this meeting, and the most important tool is the agenda. And that is going to be your homework assignment today. You need to set an agenda before the meeting. So your agenda needs to be well thought out. It needs to be sent before the meeting, right? Prior to the beginning of the meeting, send out that agenda. And it should provide information about the meeting objectives. And it should give the participants an indication of the kind of participation preparation they will be required, right, to show during this meeting. How involved will you be in this meeting? If an agenda item is brainstorm for the next fundraising event or activity, they know they need to come with some fundraising events or activities in their mind, right, to share at the meeting. The agenda is very, very, very important. You need a specific, results-oriented, and people take this for granted, but a timed agenda, especially if you have different people speaking at this meeting, and it needs to be realistic. I had the responsibility of planning a workshop for colleagues in the spring. As a multi-section course coordinator, I asked that all professors teaching a particular course that I was coordinating attend a workshop that I had planned. And I invited, in addition to me, 3 speakers. And because this was a Saturday morning workshop, I said, I know that people have things to do on a Saturday morning. And so we're going to keep this meeting to 2 hours, this workshop. Well, a 2-hour workshop is almost unheard of. A 2-hour workshop with 17 teachers is almost impossible. We talk for a living. And it was a workshop about the challenges of teaching in an online environment. Well, our 2-hour workshop turned into a 3-hour workshop that only ended because I was aware that I had said 2 hours and people had things to do. And so we had to end at like 3.5 hours. I had to apologize for going so far over time, but really they were driving the discussion, so it wasn't a big deal. You have to be realistic in the time allotted to your agenda items. Know your participants, know where this might go, and set realistic goals, right? You need to plan a meeting with those objectives in mind. And based on what you told me when we started this lesson objective, right, as we talked about the things necessary for a meeting, you know that an agenda is important, right? And you know that there are things you need to do. You need to reserve the meeting room, think about practical things like space, but the mental preparation that you need for the meeting, right? The things that you need to do to prepare yourself will give you a boost as the host, right? As the person controlling the meeting. When you gather your meeting notes, when you put together any materials, when you distribute them before the meeting. And if this isn't the first meeting, then you need to make sure that the minutes of the last meeting are sent to remind people of what the focus is, right? And so that may be a part of the materials that you need to gather and distribute. And then you need to give people the opportunity to review these things. So the agenda and minutes of the last meeting need to be sent before. Okay? A key element of a successful meeting is control, maintaining the level of control. I asked you, how tightly do you think the chairperson needs to control the meeting? So what happens during the meeting, right? This is an example of just an agenda, nothing fancy. Notice it's timed, right? It's specific. We have results in blue, right? We have the time in green. We have specific objectives in red. Are they realistic? Can we do these things in the time set? All right. And so together we have a meeting that lasts 25, 37, about 45 minutes. All right. Which is reasonable when we consider all the things that people have to do. Right. So during the meeting, we're not going to look at that slide. Fixing the agenda items, we'll look at that later. So how do you maintain control? And what things you need to do during the meeting? You may need to establish control from the very start of the meeting, right? And that doesn't mean you do things like prevent people from sitting together. You scold people, now you know you want to talk or behave yourself in this meeting. No, that's not what that means. Establishing control means that you define rules at the very beginning of the meeting. You set some ground rules, right? And so what you may say is, Adam is going to deliver his 20-minute presentation. Then we're going to have a 10-minute question and answer at the end. Please hold your questions to the end of Adam's presentation. That's how you maintain control in the meeting. It's not by scolding or talking down to the participants, right? You set parameters for your discussion and let your participants know what is expected of them. That would make it easier for you to maintain control and to make sure each objective is set, right? Then you control the discussion, right? What does that mean? You need people skills. You need to be able to relate to people because people in the meeting have their own agenda now. Some people in the meeting are going to be disgruntled, right? Or they're going to have personalities that clash with other people at the meeting. And they may stop the meeting from being as productive as possible. I guarantee you, you're going to meet some of or work with some of these people and will have to meet with them from time to time. So who are some of the people you're going to meet with or the people who will attend your meeting? So there's going to be the talker, right? That person who is going to monopolize the conversation, have the most to say, not allow anybody else to share ideas because he or she is always right. So that person may be in your meeting and you're going to have to figure out how to manage that person and allow other people to share, right? Then you may have the disgruntled, cynical employee, right? That person who doesn't really like his or her job. They only want to complain. And I'm sure as I go through this, you have people in mind, right? They don't see the value in anything being proposed because, oh, this never gets done. And, oh, we're going to put this up. And you know they're going to say we don't have the money for it. Or, oh, we keep moving in circles, right? Then you're going to have the narrow-minded employee who doesn't want to accept change. They don't really think outside the box. They're not willing to accept that, you know, new ideas are valuable. We've been doing this the same way all the time. Why we got to change it now? Then in this meeting, you may also have to manage the quiet one. The employee who never has anything to say. You kind of have to pull ideas out of them. You know they have ideas, but they're shy and reserved. And so you may need to try to stimulate them to share, right? And then you may have the disruptive employee. That person who didn't hear you at the beginning of the meeting when you said, please put your phone on silent, and their phone goes off, right? Or they distract other participants. They came in late and they're trying to figure out what we're talking about now. Or who's coming up next? Or what did I miss? That disruptive person that's gonna have their side conversations while you're trying to hold a productive meeting. So as the person managing the meeting, you are going to have to be skilled in also managing personalities and people at this meeting. If you want to meet the objectives that you have set, be aware of the different types that you will interact with at this meeting, right? And that's not an easy task, right? But you have to keep people productive. The better your people skills are, the more likely your meeting will be a success. It's very important. Good, so I'm gonna stop for questions. Any questions? I've said a lot as we move through. The key though, as you're managing people, it's not just, and holding this meeting, it's not just being knowledgeable about your subject, right? It's not just being prepared gathering your notes and being able to lead discussion, having ideas. You have to be tactful, right? You have to be patient with people. We talked about the different personality types, and they will challenge you and they will annoy you, but you can't show that, right? Take it from a teacher who has had to master tact over the years and even master my facial expressions. I think I said that to you in the past. I may speak politely and tactfully. My face doesn't always obey. And so I may have a totally different expression on my face. And sometimes my students tease me about it, right? But be tactful and patient with people as you try to take control of the meeting. You can't allow people to argue amongst themselves or argue with you as the host, because that could happen too. There are people who will do that, right? Those disruptive employees. But you need to remember what the objectives of the meeting are, and then make sure that people stay on focus or on task, right? Especially if the issue is controversial. And again, I don't know why my mind is going to the parliamentary channel. The Speaker of the House has a very interesting role. We could talk about whether the Speaker is effective or not. We could debate that all day. They have an interesting and a very difficult task, because what you're doing is managing two opposing sides with strongly held beliefs and opinions. And politics tends to be emotional anyway, right? And so that person has a very, very difficult job. You see them maintaining order, minimizing interruptions. You hear them calling for members of the meeting to only address their comments to the floor, not attack each other. You hear them, the speaker threatening, right, that they will not warn another member of the House anymore. That is an important role. Now, the person chairing a formal meeting, because that is a formal meeting that's less emotional, may not have that difficult task, but it is possible for meetings, if the issue is really controversial, to be heated, right? And so that person has an even more difficult task. And you're taking notes during the meeting, right? Because remember, your work doesn't end when the meeting ends, right? You may need to assign this to someone. Someone should be taking minutes, right? Taking notes. You can't chair a meeting and take notes. But if there are things in particular that you have assigned for different people to do, or assigned for yourself, find more information about this, you may want to jot that down, right? Because the person taking the minutes may take a while, may take several days before the minutes are complete and ready, right, for you to review. Take your own notes so that you can review any action items that you have to complete, okay? All right, so what happens at the end of the meeting? You talked about this, assigning the note taker, timekeeper. So after the meeting, there are some very important things. Remember now, the meeting doesn't end, you go back to your job and that's it until the next meeting. No, at the end of the meeting, there are some important things, 3 very important things that you need to be aware of. There need to be conclusions, there need to be action items, and you need minutes, right? You could have had the best discussion possible, but if there's no follow-up, then what was the point of the meeting, right? If there are no action items, what was the point of the meeting? If you don't identify people responsible for those action items and give them completion dates, can you have this done by X date? And then you also need to identify incomplete items from previous meetings. So-and-so was supposed to do this last meeting. Where are we with that, right? Any unfinished business. If you're not able to identify and resolve those things, then the meeting is pointless, right? So you want to make sure that minutes, careful minutes, are taken during the meeting. And oftentimes you may hear meeting participants say things like, this is not for the minutes, when they want things off the record, right? Things that they may believe are personal, right? Not that you bring in your family business or deeply personal issues to the meeting, but sometimes you may say off the record or not for the minutes, because remember now, minutes are an official record of what happens. An official meaning this could go far, right? So what you don't want reflected in the minutes, either don't say or make clear, right? When you don't follow these 3 important steps, conclusions, action items, and meeting minutes, then you didn't have a productive meeting, right? So when we plan and give out our agenda and give out our minutes, we do it well. Where we fall down on in planning the meetings is the follow through on the action steps after the meeting. That's often where the lack of productivity is seen. That's often where the feeling that we still talking about this, the same resolve yet? How can we still be on this? That's where that comes from. And a skilled meeting organizer and leader are key in avoiding that non-productive meetings. One of the key things to take away from this discussion is, as you're planning the meeting and holding the meeting and action items and giving conclusions at the end, be aware of people's time, respect people's time. Stick to the time that you said the meeting would take. And as you're giving people things to do, be realistic in the amount of time awarded or allowed for them to do it. Respect people's time. So start your meeting on time, end your meeting on time, and be aware, it's difficult for us to have a 3-hour online course. It's really difficult. The rule is after an hour, people zone out, their attention span goes somewhere else. Not a lot gets done. This is why we try to break the monotony, or I try to break the monotony by being more interactive. So we'll stop for practical, we'll stop for discussion, right? To keep people focused, because it's hard. The same thing is true for any other meeting. After an hour, people looking at you like, how much longer? Or thinking about what they have for lunch. If this is a morning meeting, or all the things they have to do, they need to wrap this up. I have X, Y, and Z planned to do today on my agenda, right? Good. So we're gonna look at some sample agenda and meeting minutes. This is brief, right? I'm gonna look at this. And then I'm gonna show you an expanded template. And then we'll look at some examples and talk about whether they're effective or ineffective, all right? I want you to have a look at what's on the screen. So the minutes are distributed shortly after the meeting takes place, right? They're key things, key parts of the meeting minutes. You won't have to do minutes for a homework assignment, but you do need to be aware of the parts of meeting minutes. So write down the parts, the components of meeting minutes. First is the agenda. You see it, it's a short agenda, right? You need an agenda. It's a good idea to allot times, right? And a multi-step agenda, a multi-item agenda, give people time so that you can manage your meeting better. Then you need to include in your minutes a summary of each agenda item you're going to discuss. And it needs to be, it's a summary. We talked about summaries and what they involve, but it needs to be detailed enough so that anyone who didn't attend the meeting can get a gist of what happened at the meeting by reading the minutes, right? Then you need action items. You need action items, the next steps agreed on during the meeting, including who's gonna do it and what will they do. All right? Deb is gonna post, look at a new blog, look at the new blog, send news items for posting to Deb, all right? There's certain things we notice about the meeting minutes. It's detailed, right? Everyone should be able to understand this and follow this. And it needs to be comprehensible to everyone. Everyone needs to be able to understand, because as more time goes on, people are gonna forget what was covered at this meeting, right? So having the items in writing keeps people organized, all right, in terms of what's being accomplished. And then the formatting too is important. So you want it to be clean. This doesn't look cluttered to me. You may want to include more space, right, if that's going to declutter the document. You need clean headers. Show where sections begin and end. And then it needs to follow a certain structure or order, right? So people don't want from you a minute by minute record of the meeting. That's not what the minutes are. It's not what happened at every second, but it's a tangible record. It's a source of information for people who didn't attend. So the most important and salient points go in the meeting minutes, the essence of the meeting. So what does it include? If you look at this on screen, you'll see date and time, right? That's important. The names of the participants, and also regrets, people who didn't come. In this case, it says Johnny Roberts, opposite. Acceptance, or you may have corrections or amendments to previous meeting minutes, right? Decisions that have been made about any agenda items, so action steps, next steps, if a vote was taken, what was the outcome of the vote, motions taken or rejected, items to be held over, new business, right? And then the next meeting date and time. So those are key parts of the meeting minutes. You give a record of what happened, an overview for people who attended the meeting to be reminded of what happened, for those who didn't attend the meeting to understand. Okay? Awesome. All right, so any questions? I'm going to show you a sample agenda. We're going to move specifically to what an agenda looks like, because this is what you're going to be doing for homework. So let me close this out. Someone else, go ahead. You have a question?
No, I pressed it by mistake. Sorry.
Okay, all right, cool. All right, so we're going to look at the agenda template first. And I'm going to send this to you. I need to make a note that I'm sending this as well. After a certain age, everything has to be diarized or noted. You will see. It's very interesting. All right, so this is pretty big. I'm gonna have to reduce this to 170. Hopefully you can see, because there's so much, right? So this is a template. When you do your assignment, you might want to follow this. It doesn't have to be this detailed. Your meeting, actually, I mean, what I mean is it doesn't have to include all of these items. Your meeting, your agenda, right, can be decided by you, but this is a basic structure. If there are multiple people speaking, that is, you might follow this structure where you have date, time, location, meeting agenda at the top, the goals, or a description of the meeting, Agenda item 1, a description. You have time, purpose, leader, remarks, and we're gonna, this is just a template. We're gonna look at this filled out, what this looks like filled out in a minute. Item 2, same thing. Item 3, this is a big agenda, down to 5. And I made it purposely big to give you an idea of what a more formal meeting with a really precise agenda might look like. Okay? So I'm going to send this to you after class, but what does this look like in practice? All right. Let me close this. Here we go. Okay. I'm also going to send this to you. I got this from some resource, I can't remember. But this is a sample agenda. So we have a description of the meeting. This is internal, so date and time, 9 to 1. Board meetings can be quite long, right? We have the host, we have attendees, and then we have the time allowed or allotted and different agenda items. Under the welcome, we have an opening, attendance, approval of the agenda, and then we move to action to item 2 on the agenda, review of previous minutes. That is approved or amended, action since the last meeting, progress of assignment, okay? This, for your homework assignment, would be adequate, right, in terms of an agenda. It doesn't have to be as detailed as the template, remember, but I wanted to give you a broad example of what an effective agenda might involve. The most important thing is time, clear objectives and agenda items, the names of presenters, and then the information at the top. Very important. Okay. This helps to keep your meeting productive, to make sure you are focused, on target, and that you are at every stage meeting the objectives that you have set. Okay. Awesome. So I want you to keep this in mind, because now we're going to look at some other examples and determine how good they are, what they might be missing, how can we improve the agenda. So let me stop the share and close this out. 1 second, let me make a note. So now, so look at this. So this is an example. agenda. All right, so I just showed you a template and I just showed you something more detailed. Based on what I showed you, do you think this agenda would be satisfactory? Would you turn this in for your next graded assignment, for instance? You should all be looking at something that says background, aims, questions, answers. Okay, Leslie says no. Why not, Leslie?
Because it's very vague. If someone was to look back at this, it doesn't explain what the meeting was about, what the meeting is, things
Good.
like that. Mhm.
So we don't know what this meeting is about, right? We also need, the reason we have, let me stop the share for 1 second. And we'll go back to what I just shared. Okay, something didn't happen. Sorry, let me stop the share. I'm sharing too much. Hang on, we have 1 or 2 technical glitches. There it is. Why is it that we have, at the beginning of this agenda that I just shared with you, why is it that we have a list of attendees? Bob, Ann, Greg, Tom, Dave, first and last name, remember, Brandon, Christina, and Rachel. This is the agenda. Why do we have these lists of attendees? The meeting hasn't happened yet. What did we obviously do before the meeting? And you may or may not do this, but why? It's a good idea to do it. It is definitely preferred to do it. And that way, when people can't attend, you have your apologies. So this is good meeting practice. Now, if you're having a little powwow, like Chanel told us, then you don't have this. But what does this person obviously do? You have the number of people attending the meeting. You get confirmation of who will be at your meeting. That's important because you need to prepare. Remember, we talked about practical consideration, space in the room. We talked about things like, is this from 9 to 1? What does this mean? You're probably gonna have to provide some refreshments for people. 10, 11, 12, 1, 4 hours. Probably provide lunch. People work through lunch or something. So you need to know who's attending the meeting. All right, so I'm gonna stop this share and go back. Let me close this out. And go back to the bad example. This. So we don't know who's at this meeting. We don't know the purpose of the meeting. What else doesn't this agenda provide? What's missing? Who's doing the presentation under 1, for instance? Do you know? We don't know. That would be good. Who's doing this and how long is this going to be? The person chairing this meeting is going to have to make it clear that questions and answers need to follow, right? What launch event are we brainstorming ideas for? All right, this is too vague and far, far, far too broad. All right. Okay, so this is definitely not something that you would want to submit for your grade next class. All right, so let me stop this. And we're gonna look at, close this up. We're gonna look at something that I want you to correct. Actually jot down and correct. As you're correcting this, I want you to also look at the order of events proposed for this meeting. I'm going to email this to each of you so that you can correct this. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to make some corrections, make notes about what needs to be corrected. So let me send this to each student in the class. All right. This should be coming to you. I want you to be able to see it better, so I'm going to send it to you so that you can make the corrections, make the notes. So I just sent that. I'm going to give you like 10 minutes to jot down things that you feel need to be corrected, and then we can engage. Oh, I accidentally sent that to Mr. Pratt too. I included him in the meeting, in the email.
We're correcting the sales team
And
meeting.
it came under intro to business communication report writing. I didn't change the subject. I was sending it in a hurry, but it should have just gotten into your inbox at 7:50. That should help you to identify the correct message. 7:50, so I'm going to give you, like I said, about 10 minutes.
Good night, Ms. X. Are we receiving this over email?
I'm sorry, who's in the class? I didn't realize, oh, Byron, you came in. Oh, I didn't realize you had come in, Byron. I'll send it to you. I didn't send it, because I didn't realize you were in class. I sent it to those students whose attendance I'd noted. 1 sec, okay?
I didn't get it either,
Who's that?
Alexis.
Alexis Toot?
Mhm.
All right, okay, I'm gonna send it to you. And
Are we sending this back to you or?
no,
we're
I just
discussing it?
I emailed it so that you could have a better view. Did anybody in the class get my email? Because it's saying the last email I sent was at 5:41.
I got it.
Well, what happened to that sent? Okay, let me go.
I
into
got
my,
it as
something
well.
just happened. Yeah, okay. I don't know why it's in my archives. All right, so let me forward it. This is now going to Byron and Alexis. Alexis, what is your email address? It's not coming up. It's not auto-filling when I type in your name. Is it Alexis too?
278 at Gmail.
78. That's it. Gotcha. Okay. So I just sent it to you. Since I didn't send it to those students, I'm gonna just give you a couple more minutes to read over the sample. So you would have gotten one email with 4 attachments from me just now. Your assignment that's going to be due on Sunday. The samples that you should look at as you're completing the assignment, 2 of them. One is a template, one is filled out, right? So use the filled out one. The template is just to give you a general guideline. And then the video in context rubric. Okay, so what did you come up with for the agenda? What's wrong with it? How would it benefit from some changes? What could we do? Let me make sure I'm looking at. What would help this? First of all, are the items in an order that makes sense?
No.
No, they're not.
Okay, they're not. So what would come first? The standing items should come first, right? So you take
Right.
attendance, you approve the prior meetings minutes, team status updates, they come first. Then what should come second?
The last meeting
The
business.
last meeting's business. And then make sure you give times, right? And then you have new business, and then you have housekeeping,
Housekeeping.
right? It has to be arranged in an order that makes sense. So keep that in mind as you're putting your agenda together too. You want one, to give each person the amount of time you think necessary as the person putting this meeting together, controlling it, and then the order of the business or the meeting's proceedings, right? It's very important. Okay, so I know that you're probably tired, but we have one more thing to do. One more thing, and that is, I told you we're going to talk about what makes meetings more effective. So it's a relatively not too short, but short enough. That's the last thing that we're going to do tonight. Watch a video on revolutionizing meetings. Oh no, I like my little videos. He said something that I found so interesting. It's the thing that occupies most of our day, and it's probably the least productive thing that we do. So let me pull up the link. I see what's going on. I'm not at the top of my files. I think I'm also partial to this because this is a TED Talk from my alma mater. And so we're gonna watch ways to revolutionize meetings. Since that has been the focus of our discussion. I see 2 people talking to me in the chat. 1 second, I didn't get the email. All right, I see you. Okay. So what is your role? We've been talking about the role of the person organizing and planning the meeting to get the meeting's objectives met. But how do you make it a more enjoyable experience for people attending? Now, this guy is a little bit excited, right? He's really excited about his topic, which is a good thing, but be forewarned.
All right. Well, it is a pleasure to be here. Who wants to talk about meetings? Yeah. So while we often don't like going to meetings, talking about meetings is kind of fun. So in keeping with the theme of this event, I titled my conversation, "The Power of You to Make Meetings Truly Work." Now, given how much people tend to hate meetings, I did think of an alternative title, "The Power of You to Make Meetings Less Time-Sucking, Miserable, Dreaded, Annoying, and Wasteful," but instead I chose a more optimistic title, because I truly believe that by leveraging the science of meetings, we can make meetings truly work. All right, so let me share with you some data about this crazy topic. So first of all, there are around 55 million meetings a day in the US alone. Most individuals have around 15 meetings a week, but that time increases as we move up an organization's hierarchy. And at the same time, meetings has been identified as the #1 time waster at work. But this last stat is the most sobering. Over 70% of senior managers see meetings as unproductive. But they're the ones calling the meetings. So when you put this together, a high base rate activity, tons of meetings, tons of frustration, you could make the case that we are both living and dying in meetings. But for me, I saw it as an opportunity. As an organizational psychologist, the thought of studying something and working to improve something that's making people miserable is actually quite exciting, especially because a world without meetings is much more problematic. Without meetings, cooperation, communication, coordination, consensus, decision-making are all compromised. In fact, in many regards, organizational democracy takes place in meetings. So the elimination of meetings is a false goal. The elimination of bad meetings is the true goal. All right, so can research provide some help? Yes, thank you. Absolutely. I'd have to end the TED Talk right then. Yes, absolutely, research can provide some help. There's research that compares standing up meetings to sitting down meetings. Interestingly, the quality of the outcomes is the same, but standing up meetings take half as much time. There's research that looks at satisfaction with meetings. And yes, there is someone who leaves a meeting feeling like it went pretty well, and that's the meeting leader. Meeting leaders are feeling all right, but why not? They're in control of the experience. There's some research about brainstorming, but brainstorming in silence. If you have individuals brainstorm in silence in meetings, recording their ideas on paper or through an app, they generate nearly twice as many ideas, and those ideas tend to be more creative and innovative because people aren't filtering. Well, let me share with you some other work that I've done to set the stage for some implications. So first of all, in one of my first studies, I had individuals maintain a diary of how many meetings they were having each day and also how they felt about their day at work. And interestingly, the more meetings people had, they reported just feeling drained and fatigued. And the saddest part of it is they felt that work was not accomplished. However, there were certain individuals who actually seemed to thrive with lots of meetings. For those people who aren't goal-oriented, more meetings, the better. But those are not typically your best performers. So the flip side of it is that for those individuals who do tend to be goal-oriented, which are your best performers, more meetings seem to take a bigger toll on their well-being. But here's the good news. When the meetings were high quality, those negative effects of having so many meetings were mitigated. All right, my final study. And I think in many regards, this is the most important study. So in this study, we had employees, we tracked them over time, we had them identify the types of meeting practices their bosses did, and we assessed employee engagement. Now, we know employee engagement is critical to organizations. Those employees who are more engaged perform better, they help each other more, and they're generally just happier. Well, what we found is that those leaders who were more judicious in the calling of meetings, so they only called them when they were relevant, those leaders who carefully managed time in meetings, And those leaders who were able to create freedom of speech in meetings, employees reported more engagement. So while we often think about meetings as being places of drain, meetings can be places of gain when done right. So the overall takeaway in 2 words, meetings matter. Meetings truly matter. Meetings done wrong take a toll on employee well-being, frustration, opportunity costs, and even something called meeting recovery syndrome. Meeting recovery syndrome is this idea that when we have a bad meeting, we just don't shed it at the door. It sticks with us. We ruminate and we co-ruminate. But meetings done right are incredible opportunities for inclusion, innovation, return on investment, many, many positive things. So, who's responsible for meeting improvement? We all are. Everyone can find some meeting that they lead at work or in the community, so we all have a responsibility to try to make these things better. Which is why my title is The Power of You to Make Meetings Truly Work. All right, so now let me tell you, what do good meeting leaders do? So how can we become excellent meeting leaders? So first of all, excellent meeting leaders think differently. They recognize that fundamentally, when you call a meeting, you are a steward of others' time. And by having that mindset of stewardship, you fundamentally approach the meeting differently. Most notably, you think, because you care. You want to honor the time of others. So while research shows that 50% of agendas are recycled, you would not do that, because you will not dial it in. You want to honor people's time. So you actively make choices. Let me share some of these choices. So first of all, you go for the smallest number of people reasonable, but you have a no spectators rule. You consider inviting people for part of the meeting, but not all of the meeting. So therefore, you can keep the meeting lean and not waste people's time. However, for those people who are more secondary, you choose to keep them in the loop. You still make them feel valued, because one of the things that we find in our research is that when people are not invited to a meeting, they find that just as worrisome, because they worry that they're being excluded. Number 2, don't just default to 1-hour meetings. Why are meetings 1 hour? Well, that's just the default setting on Microsoft Outlook. That is not a good reason to have a 1-hour meeting, especially because of Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law is this idea that work expands to whatever time is allotted to it. So if you schedule a 1-hour meeting, lo and behold, it takes 1 hour. But we can use this to our advantage. Given the goals of a meeting, we could say this meeting should be 36 minutes or 48 minutes. And those meetings will also take that. But once we decide on a meeting time, dial it back a little bit, create some additional pressure. Psychological research suggests that when teams are under a little bit of pressure, they perform optimally and they're more focused. Number 3, be unconventional at times. Mix it up. Try different things. For example, consider a walking meeting. Research shows that when you do a walking meeting, people report higher satisfaction and even more creativity. But there are some important rules of thumb with walking meetings. First of all, they need to be small, just 2 or 3 people. Second, you need to tell people in advance you're doing a walking meeting so they can wear the proper shoes. You want to make sure that you walk in a circle. And you also want to make sure that the agenda makes sense for a walking meeting, right? You can't show a deck as you carry your laptop for a nice walk. Also, there are other purposes that could be questionable. So for example, if you're going to fire somebody, probably a nice walk in the park is not going to do much for them. But the more I think about it, actually a walking meeting is perfect in that consideration, right? Because you can just walk right to the car. Start your meetings well. Remember, as a meeting leader, you are fundamentally a host. You called this gathering together. And as a host, you want to make people feel appreciated and welcome. You want to greet them. And if a couple people don't know each other, you make the introduction because you're a host. Also, as a host, it's okay to bring snacks every once in a while. As crazy as it sounds, one of the best predictors of meeting satisfaction around the globe are snacks. And it's not the snacks in and of themselves, but the fact that you took some time to think and consider others.
That's my internet connection.
Number 5,
Sorry.
given this meeting leader blind spot I mentioned earlier, you need to check yourself. You need to evaluate how you are as a meeting leader periodically. So ask the regular attendees, how am I doing? What am I doing well? What can I do better? What are your ideas for making our meetings optimal? All right, anyone want a bonus? All right, good. This is an important moment because if you said no, I'd have to change my slides in real time, so I'm glad that you want a bonus. All right, I want to say something about agendas. I want to give you kind of what I see as a really exciting innovation. I know we don't think of agendas as being exciting innovations, but I think this is an exciting innovation. Instead of creating your meeting agendas organized by topics, consider organizing it by questions to be answered. Ooh. Having questions to be answered fundamentally changes the meeting. When you think of it as questions to be answered, now you have a litmus test for determining who actually needs to be there, because they're fundamental to answering the questions. You have a better sense of when to end the meeting, because the questions have been answered. And you know what meeting success looks like. The questions have been answered in a compelling way. And if you can't generate questions, that's your clue that the meeting does not need to happen. So, here we are at our conclusion. And what's so exciting about meetings is that with 55 million of these a day, if we can just make 20% of these 20% better, the incremental effects will be amazing. And while we can't control others' meetings, we can control our own meetings. We can do them right. We can engage in behaviors that truly communicate that we are a steward and that we're honoring the time of others. So, with that, I thank you and I appreciate being here.
Okay, so some of what he said may not work in our setting, right? But he did say some important things, and we can extrapolate from this the need to always be examining ourselves. And so we may be thinking, no, well, I don't hold meetings now. I'm not responsible for hosting meetings now. But we don't know what the future will hold, right? We're engaging in this course and improving business communication because we are directing our careers in a particular path. And so always be examining yourself and thinking about your interaction with people and how effective are you as a leader, right? How effective are you as somebody who people look to get things done? And then don't be afraid to think outside the box, right? I remember as a young teacher, it was very difficult for me to engage my students. And so I had to start teaching them outside. Sometimes the classroom was too warm. Sometimes the classroom was too stifling. So I'd take them outside, find a grassy area, we'd sit down and we'd have lessons in the park, right? So there are things that we can do to adapt. He talks about walking meetings. Would that work for you, a person in a position of leadership and eventually maybe hosting meetings, or if you do it now? Chanel started us off tonight by talking about these little powwows, reframing how people think of meetings, since this is opposition. It doesn't have to be as formal as a meeting. Let's do a little temperature check. Let's do a little powwow. Let's do a touch base session, an idea sharing session. Reframe the way people think about it so that you can reframe people's response to it as well. Okay, good. So we had a full class tonight. My apologies again for having missed class last week. We are back on schedule. Let me stop this share. There it is. I just need to take attendance and then you will be free to go Those of you who have questions for me, please stay behind. After the meeting, if you don't have any questions, you're free to leave. I'm maintaining a grade book on an Excel. And so at some point before the semester ends, before final exam, I'm going to meet with students individually. All right, and share grade book. All right, today is March 8th. When I call your name, please say present. Ricardo? Chanel?
Yeah.
Byron is here.
Yeah.
Danielle? You still here, Danielle?
Yes. Here.
Dimitri? Johnson?
Yeah.
Courtney?
Yeah.
Crystal?
Yeah.
Leslie? Okay, everyone else is here. Shanique, Ellen. All right, have a good evening.
Good evening.
Good night.
Good evening.
All right.
Hi, Miss Hicks.
Hi. Hold on, let me stop. 1 second, let me stop the recording.